Now, although I didn't need Sheila E. to assist me in making this overall point that I've been making, since I would say 2 years, that there is no such thing as Latin percussions as it relates to R&B music and funk. But it is good to hear someone of her stature confirming what I've been saying, at least for that long. So I want you guys to listen to this portion of an interview Sheila E. had in 2012. Now, the interviewer uses the term Latin percussions in his question, but in her response, she doesn't repeat the term Latin percussions. She actually just says percussions. So as you listen to this interview, she will reveal why Latin rhythms is inconsistent with R&B music and funk music. Therefore, to suggest that there is a Latin influence based on the use of the conga drum is clearly at best an overstatement and at worst a total lie. Now, I'm also going to feature a little excerpt of an interview with Joe Baton, who pretty much echoes the same sentiment. So without any further ado, let's get into it.
In order to sell the tickets. So, the economy changed. A lot had to do with it,
You played also because you're Latin jazz, and that you saw the whole fusion thing.
Mm-hmm.
One thing interesting, again, it's like Latin music went into jazz. It had been a Cuban thing, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed like when you took Miles's band and when you took George Duke, and all the people came out of Miles's band,
mm-hmm.
Latin percussion became part of jazz in a way it hadn't before.
Yeah, that's what was so cool, and myself being able to play with all these guys at such a young age, and I was really young, and to be able to play with Herbie, and incorporate percussion, and he said, sky's the limit, whatever you want to bring. I brought bottles, put water in it, played water bottles, played whatever I could find. It's just, we were creating, and there wasn't a thing where we said, okay, we have to just play this specific part as a percussion player to match up with the drummer. It was like experimenting, Same thing happened with George. George Duke, playing with him as well. He asked me to be in the band, and I said, well, what do you want me to play? These parts. He goes, no, you play whatever. You make it up as you go create. We're creating sound. We know what the song is, so you get involved and, just play what feels right for you, And to be a part of that, it feels like that's what it was supposed to be, It was jazz was supposed to have percussion, and again, finding that space, what had to happen at the time. The other thing that was really interesting was for Latin percussion players and how traditional Latin percussion is played, they had to abide by the clave, which is something that a lot of people don't know. And it's, instead of the funk being 2 and 4, which 1, 2, 3, 4, you got this clave. It's either or dun dun. Dun 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 dun. So it's 2 3 or 3 2. With percussion players playing salsa music, they wanted to apply that clave to the funk. They wanted to apply clave to jazz, and it didn't always work. And so us as percussion players, especially me growing up with my dad being a Latin jazz artist, he said for me not to listen to the clave, that to ignore the clave and listen to the 2 and 4. That's your clave, is that funk, that 2 and 4. Then play around that. That allowed me as a percussion player to be able to play with all kind of bands, because I did a Latin feel, but it was based on the 2 and 4 and not the clave. When I applied the clave to it, it changed the rhythm, and it really didn't fit. And I had to figure out, well, this is a traditional beat that a conga player would play, but it doesn't apply to this funk. So I got to now make up things that, you just kind of make up parts that fits that spot.
You basically had to reinvent how you play.
Absolutely.
Seriously, wow.
No, I had to reinvent how I play. I had to, just throw the clave out the window. And that ended up being something that was a little bit different for the traditional percussionists, because they weren't getting the gigs that I was getting, because they stuck to the clave and they stuck to that form of playing, and it just didn't sound right, And then I started getting calls like, you understand what that 2 and 4 is? You understand what the funk is? I was like, yeah, my clave is a 2 and 4. That's all I know.
Wow, that's really interesting. Because I mean, I was going to say to you, why do you think you have been able to? I mean, when you look at your resume, you've managed to play with a super wide range of artists, more than almost any other Latin percussionists I can think of. You know, quite honestly, and you know, whatever the background. And is that because you think you've just been very adaptable?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't want. I thought that if you came in to do a gig as a percussion player, it's like, you know, looking at a painting on the wall and it's been painted already. Well, they're asking you to add one color on that painting. Well, where are you going to put the color if it's already done? How are you going to fit? That's my job, is to figure out where do I fit. So just because I know stuff that's traditional doesn't mean that I have to apply that for every single thing. It doesn't. You can't win that way. You can't talk to everyone the same way. You can't reach someone with the same speech all the time.
Actually, the Boogaloo saved Latin music. There were times where a lot of the Jewish population, the black population, used to go out dancing. When the Boogaloo came about, it was so tremendous, it was similar to the twist. And people were flocking from everywhere to see people dance in a hall, everybody stomping their feet and clapping their hands in harmony. That a lot of those purists and bands that have been playing with the Pres Prados, Xavier Cubards, Tito Puentes along, couldn't follow in the same vein. You got to understand, and I'm sure you might know this when you get people to play in your groups, or you invite people over your house to listen to music. You can take a black person that normally has a history of soul and that doesn't listen to Latin music, and then you attempt to tell him to play Latin music and use a clave. He doesn't know that. The same thing is true for the Latino, who has grown up listening to guaguancó, mambos, and cha-chas. He has no inkling of the backbeat or what's happening in R&B. So when you put those people into your group, there's a teaching process. I've been able to do it. I've had all kinds of play. But if you find the purists, they normally keep to their own genre of people that play the music. That doesn't happen anymore. But it was happening like that for a long time in the business. It was very difficult, and it still is, to find bands that could play both authentically. That means to play on clave and to really hit it back and do harmony and do doo-wop or disco. So the story goes back in the schools when it came to prom time in June when they were having their high school graduations. The kids would all get together and they would say, look, we want to have Cooling Gang at our graduation. It was all the black kids. Then all the Latino kids got up and said, no, we want Tito Puente. So because they couldn't agree, they said, look, you know what we can do? Let's get Joe Bataan. And for that reason, I got a lot of the work in New York back then because I was able to play both. You know, so I was fortunate.
What I like to know is how many more examples do I need to provide to demonstrate my point, to prove my point, that there is no such thing as the Latin breakdown or Latin percussions as it relates to R&B music and funk music. And so when this argument is made that hip-hop, the foundation of hip-hop relies on Latin percussions, that's a total lie. I didn't say that. Sheila E. said that, basically. She said that funk is the father of hip-hop. Funk is the father of hip-hop. Not Latin percussions. Funk is. She also said that her father said, forget about the clave. That doesn't work with R&B music. She also said that she was told by the people that she played with, get in where you fit in. Just be creative. Even though she tried to implement so-called Latin ideas, she realized it didn't work. So she got it in her mind to say, you know what? I'm going to play this R&B thing. I'm just going to add what I do to this R&B thing. And that's what she did. And that's what made her so successful. Thumb up the video, subscribe, and share. Peace.